Your $1,000 titanium flagship smartphone dies before your afternoon commute, leaving you stranded staring into a youthless black mirror while waiting for a train. Meanwhile, a $200 slab of plastic from Motorola will outlast a weekend camping trip while doubling as a blunt instrument. We are targeting leaked TENAA and BIS certification documents, basically the regulatory bouncers for consumer electronics in China and India, along with industry reporting from GS Marina, Tech Advisor, and My Mobile India. Our mission today involves a deep dive into the upcoming Motorola Moto G36 5G, bearing the model number.
Housing a 6,790 milliamp hour rated battery, which translates directly to a 7,000 milliamp hour typical capacity power cell, serves as the entire physical foundation for this device.
That massive power plant is the sole reason this phone currently dominates the rumor mill. You know, having a 7,000 milliamp hour battery feels like total invincibility until you actually have to charge the thing.
The 3C certification reveals this phone only supports 33-watt fast-wired charging.
Pushing 33 watts into a cell that size is like filling an Olympic swimming pool with a standard garden hose.
Restricting the intake pipe to 33 watts forces the chemical conversion process to occur at a glacial pace. Pumping electricity into a lithium-ion battery generates immense heat as ions physically move back and forth.
Wait, pushing higher wattage requires sophisticated cooling mechanisms like copper vapor chambers, correct?
Motorola deliberately avoids those expensive thermal management systems to maintain the budget price tag. Stacking cheaper, denser materials into a larger physical footprint achieves that headline-grabbing 7,000 number.
You plug it in at night, go to sleep, wake up, and the device is probably still siphoning electricity from the wall.
This specific thermal limitation prevents the budget components from literally melting down under sustained electrical pressure.
These astronomical numbers then bleed over to the rest of the spec sheet, mutating into total marketing hallucinations. Like the TENAA listing specifically claims, this device will offer up to 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage.
The regulatory filing outlines a tiered memory structure starting at 4 gigabytes, jumping to 8, then 12, and peaking at 16.
Slapping 16 gigabytes of RAM onto a sub-200-pound budget phone running a 2.4 gigahertz processor is like putting a Formula One spoiler on a golf cart. It looks incredibly aggressive on paper. It does nothing for you on the grass.
The processor simply cannot digest the data fast enough. Last year's predecessor, the Moto G35, ran on a 2.2 GHz Unisoc T760 chip.
Tech Advisor specifically noted sluggish performance as their primary criticism of the G35 during their review last October.
A 0.2 GHz bump will never fix that underlying stuttering performance. Budget processors suffer from tiny internal cache sizes, relying on slow memory controllers to shuffle data back and forth.
You are never going to utilize that massive memory pool before the weak processor creates a severe data bottleneck.
Yeah.
You try to quickly switch between Google Maps and Spotify while navigating a busy intersection.
That 16 gigabytes of RAM promises both applications will stay open instantly.
Your weak processor ensures the screen will simply freeze for 3 agonizing seconds while you miss your exit entirely.
Submitting maximum theoretical configurations to regulatory bodies operates as a standard industry tactic. Manufacturers secure clearance for a 16 gigabyte model that will almost certainly never see a commercial release.
They throw imaginary RAM at a very real silicon problem. We see this identical pattern of inflated numbers tearing through the camera specification reports across these leaks.
Official certification bodies and established tech outlets remain completely divided on basic optics.
The secondary 8-megapixel rear camera is where the conflict starts. My Mobile India claims this is a 2x optical zoom lens. Tech Advisor and GS Marina confidently report it as an ultra-wide lens. Why can't leakers agree on basic optics?
A device in this specific budget bracket featuring a dedicated 2x optical zoom hardware module remains highly improbable. Telephoto lenses require complex glass elements spaced precisely apart to physically bend light.
Manufacturers rigidly reserve telephoto hardware for premium pricing tiers because the glass itself costs significantly more to produce.
The 8-megapixel ultra-wide lens represents the definitive reality for the G36.
The 50-megapixel main sensor handles any magnification requirements by relying entirely on digital cropping.
The contradictions immediately spill over to the front display. My Mobile India states the punch hole houses a 20-megapixel selfie camera. Tech Advisor and GS Marina claim it is a 32-megapixel unit.
Upgrading the megapixel count does zero favors for the actual photograph if the underlying engine remains crippled. A massive megapixel number on the box tricks you to expecting professional portraits.
Capturing a photograph relies entirely on the image signal processor embedded within the phone's main processor chip. A 32-megapixel sensor absorbs an enormous amount of visual data in a fraction of a second.
The image signal processor inside a budget Unisoc chip severely lacks the computational horsepower to crunch that incoming data.
The phone automatically applies aggressive compression algorithms to prevent the processor from crashing.
The software forcibly crushes the bright highlights and smears the dark shadows. It attempts to artificially sharpen the edges to compensate for the lost detail.
You end up with 32 million incredibly muddy pixels that resemble an oil painting.
Improving camera quality demands complex algorithmic processing power. A higher pixel count on weak hardware actually produces worse final images than a lower resolution sensor paired with a highly capable processing engine.
Housing these disparate camera lenses and massive battery cells demands a significant physical footprint.
We are examining a device measuring 166.3 by 76.5 by 8.7 millimeters.
Tipping the scales at 210 grams.
Carrying a 210-gram phone in your pocket feels exactly like carrying a small brick or a hardcover book. It constantly reminds you of gravity with every single step. You feel the physical drag on your clothing.
The Moto G36 fully embraces this chunky, heavy-duty aesthetic. The rear design features a matte-finish purple back panel, resisting catastrophic shattering during a drop and completely repelling fingerprint smudges.
The signature Motorola Batwing logo sits squarely in the center. The dual-rear camera setup follows a quad-ring 2x2 grid arrangement.
Motorola groups the 50-megapixel primary sensor, the 8-megapixel ultra-wide lens, and the LED flash into a square formation.
The right side houses an elevated power key integrating the physical fingerprint sensor, placed directly below the volume rocker. Placing the fingerprint sensor on the power button remains an incredibly satisfying design choice.
You grab the phone from your pocket, your thumb naturally rests on the button, and the screen unlocks before you even lift it to your face.
The front features a 6.72-inch Full HD Plus TFT LCD pushing 1080 by 2400 pixels. A 1080p LCD represents standard protocol for this category.
The related Moto G56 offers a 120 Hz display.
The major missing detail from these certification leaks is the refresh rate.
The lack of confirmation on a 120 Hz panel for the G36 leaves a massive question mark hanging over its visual fluidity.
Redrawing the screen 60 times a second versus 120 times a second drastically alters the human perception of speed.
A 60 Hz panel physically drops frames during rapid scrolling.
The human eye detects those missing frames as visual stuttering. Sticking to a 60 Hz display forces that weak 2.4 GHz processor to feel even slower.
The interface visually drags behind your physical finger movements. Budget devices rarely receive major launch events. Motorola will silently place this device onto digital store shelves.
The Moto G36 5G acts as a chunky battery behemoth, sacrificing premium processing speed and optical clarity for sheer, unadulterated stamina. Does our relentless pursuit of paper-thin, titanium-clad devices blind us to the total freedom of owning a cheap, heavy phone that simply refuses to die?
Yeah.
Goodbye.